Yep. Good morning, everyone. So yesterday we learnt about class components. We are learning about class components. So I'm giving a overview of classes in JavaScript, class topics. I'm just giving a fast overview on that because to work with class components, you must have complete awareness on classes in JavaScript. So yesterday few points we discussed. Actually, for class components we are learning about JavaScript classes. Few basic about the JavaScript classes we are dealing with. So one is, we discussed about configuration, class configuration, and we learned about class members. In the class members, yesterday we learned about a property and accessor and a method. In class members, in class, the members can be a property or accessor or method. So in JavaScript classes concept, uh, if you are aware of few more things, then you can use them in a React. So properties for storing the data, accessor for controlling read and write operations on properties. We can control read and write operations on property by using accessor. Method is for defining any action. Actions are defined by using methods, right? Next, in class, another is constructor. Another JavaScript constructors you need to understand. And generally the purpose of constructor you already learned. So constructor is used, it is used for instantiation. Constructor is used for instantiation. So that means instantiation is the process of creating an object for class. Instantiation is the process of creating object for class. Instantiation is the process of creating object for class. So we can create an object for class by using this constructor. So constructor is responsible for creating object. Actually, constructor is a design pattern. So it is a design pattern. Technically, we call it as a design pattern. And you already learned about JavaScript constructor. What are the rules about constructor you learned in JavaScript? So constructor is anonymous. It is anonymous in JavaScript. Constructor is anonymous in JavaScript. That means it doesn't have a name. And it is a special type of subroutine that executes automatically. That executes automatically for every object. It executes automatically for every object. So it is a special type of subroutine that executes automatically for every object. So it is a special type of method that executes automatically. Generally, if we want any actions to perform at the time of creating an object, then we give that to constructor. So general concept is usually programming learners have a definition that constructor is used for initializing of values, but it is not for initializing the values. The purpose of constructor is to create an object for class. At the time of creating object for class, if you want any action to perform, that you would give define through a constructor. And generally in JavaScript, constructor is defined like this. So some product, and it have a constructor using constructor keyword. So if you want any action to perform at the time of creating an object, then you can give it to constructor. That means here later in React, you will find lot of questions asked in interviews related to component classes. Actual, what is the job of constructor? For example, see. So the example is, suppose one small action I will show here. Suppose we have some database and we have an application, and this application have to perform some actions like insert and delete like action. So insert object must insert on database, delete from database. But this insert object, before inserting, it must connect with the database. First, it should connect. After that, it should perform the action called insert. Delete also should connect, then perform delete. That means this connection is mandatory for every object. That means insert object should use the connection. Delete object should use the connection. In that case, what we can do is, if this connection is mandatory for every object must use that connection, then we will give this work to constructor. We will give that work to constructor. So what constructor can do, before inserting, it can execute that connect. Before deleting, it can execute that connect. So that means constructor automatically executes for every object. So at the time of creating an object, if you want any action and you want that action to be internally performed every time for the object, then you better give it to a constructor. So for example, here we have a class database. I'll just give a design. We have two actions, insert and another is delete. Now here we are having a script, and we have a class database. In the database class, we have insert method, which will perform document.write record inserted. And we have delete method. We have document.write record deleted. So these two actions are performed only when you call them. Insert action, delete action will be performed only when you call them. One action I want internally to perform, that I can give that action to constructor. Constructor will use an action called connected with database, and after that it can do anything. So this constructor is a special type of method which executes automatically for every object you create for database. Insert and delete will not execute for every object. They will be executed only when they are called. That means every object have to call these methods. But every object need not to call a constructor. Internally, a constructor is called. Actually, we are defining a function actions. So, or I will give that as DB action. Okay, into that we will pass some uh, action type. Action type. Okay, type. Okay. So here we will write a switch. If type, we will pass the type. And if case type is insert, then it will create an object for database class. And through that object, it will access insert method only. Object is accessing only insert method break. And if it is delete, then it will create an object. So it will create an object for this is object 2. This is object 1. It will create an object for the same database class, and through that object, it will access delete method. And usually when insert click, on click, we will call the action called DB action. Into that, we will pass insert, and on click. So we define here as DB action. This is what delete. That means now every object here, object 1 is accessing only insert, object 2 is accessing only delete. So they are accessing only insert and delete. Now we are running this, and we will see here when you click on insert here, it is going to display connected and record inserted. And I click on delete, it says connected and deleted. I am not calling the constructor here. Constructor is automatically called. It is implicitly executed. Generally, this is the class name. That is the class name. And what is this is the constructor that you defined in the class. In JavaScript, advantage is even you don't define that, it will work. That's not necessary. Generally, in all programming languages, you must mention it. But here, you just mention the class name. No need to mention about the constructor here. Why? Because constructor internally called. You don't need to do that. You see, it is internally accessed. You don't need to do that. You see now, when I click on delete, it's working. You click on insert, it is working. Then why people have an habit of writing like this? Actually, in JavaScript, not necessary. In JavaScript, it is not necessary. If you are using other OOP languages, there we have to write. In JavaScript, it is not necessary. It is required only if that constructor is expecting some parameters. If constructor is parameterized, then we will mention that. Otherwise, not necessary. That means if we created like this, that means let obj is equal to new product. This is valid. Let obj is equal to new product. This is also valid. That is also valid. Now, why we need this? That means what is that empty parenthesis? So it refers to constructor. And what is the point about that is it is required. So required only when constructor, only when it is parameterized. Only when it is parameterized. If it is parameterless, then there is no necessity of defining that. So in JavaScript, several exams, interviews, questions, they give these kind of syntaxes. Which one is valid? Because usually OOP learners know that they have to mention the class name with a constructor parenthesis. But here it is not necessary in JavaScript until or unless it is parameterized. So constructor can be constructor can be parameterized or parameterless. So if it is parameterized, the values are passed at the time of allocating memory for object. If it is parameterized, then values are passed at the time of allocating memory for object. Allocating memory for object. So constructor can be parameterized or parameterless. If it is parameterized, the values are passed at the time of allocating memory. So here the class have a constructor. This is not necessary. You don't need to mention that. And I already showed you it is also working fine. Suppose here we are asking for a drop down and an option like select database. And we have an option. So this is like Oracle or like MySQL like this. Now the point is here, when user selects and inserts into the database, means now actually constructor here is expecting database name. and it will say that connected with which database name, DB name. Now constructor is parameterized. If constructor is parameterized, then this is invalid. It is invalid. If it is parameterless, it is fine. If it is parameterized, while allocating memory for that object, we need to pass the value. Generally, here also learners have a wrong sentence. We have seen in many OOP languages, in interviews, they ask if constructor is parameterized, when to pass the values. Generally, many people have an answer like values are passed at the time of creating object, which is a wrong sentence. It is not at the time of creating object. It should be at the time of allocating memory for that object. That is the correct point. At the time of allocating memory for that object, we can define. That means it is not creating object, allocating memory for that object. Because what is new? It is a memory allocation operator, dynamic memory allocation operator. It allocates memory dynamically for that particular object. What type of memory it is allocating? What type of memory it is allocating? It is allocating the class type memory. So class is also considered as a user defined type. That means you have a string type. We have a number type. You have a Boolean type. What is that OBJ type? OBJ1. What is its type? It is a database type. It is considered as a database type. And remember, any complex type in JavaScript, it will written as object. Any complex type in JavaScript is written as object. For example, in MNC level interviews, they means in questions, test, they give like this. So type of, suppose var a is equal to new array. So here type of a is what? Type of a is what? JavaScript will return as object, not array. It will return as an object. Why it will return as an object? Because you are using an array constructor. It is an array class and you are accessing a constructor and it is creating an object for that array class. That means this A is not array type actually. It's complex type. It is called as object. If you see the type of array, it will return as object. But usually this is, we generally call array type, but technically, internally, everything is an object. Even string also considered as an object, So usually this is expecting memory allocation using new. At the time of allocating memory, what we do, we will pass the value. Now it is mandatory to mention. So we will use document.query selector, document.query selector, and what? Select dot value. So select dot value. I'm just using. The same thing I have to do here also. That means we will collect the value and pass it. That means now it is parameterized. You select a database and click on insert connected with MySQL record inserted. Selected a database and delete MySQL deleted. and Oracle, MySQL, this is this time Oracle and insert. So a constructor can be parameterized or parameterless, right? Now, if anyone asks you like, can constructor have REST parameters? Can constructor have REST parameters? Yes, constructor is just like a method. It can use all the parameter types. It can have REST parameters and it can have spread syntax also. That means spread operators also it can use. So that is already, you know, I will copy that example for you. This is example just to make you understand about the constructor. Constructor have few more rules which you will see now. For that we need to learn one more concept. So, and you already learned na, in JavaScript constructor cannot overload. You can have only a single constructor in a class. If you don't write a constructor, you have a default constructor. These all rules are same. Because you already learned in JavaScript, I'm just giving highlighting points, important points to just recall the concept. Okay. You know, now these are all the property members of a class. So what are the class members? So a class can have property, accessor, method, or constructor. Constructor. Next, important in the JavaScript class concepts, you need to understand code reusability and extensibility. Code reusability and extensibility means while working with JavaScript classes, you need to know reusability and extensibility because these all concepts you have to use in React. Sometimes people come to learn React without proper knowledge of JavaScript concepts. So in that case, you can't handle the class components if you are not completely aware of classes. That's the reason for people who missed out such concepts, I'm just giving an outline. If you haven't learned such concept, majority these days, everyone learns this while learning JavaScript. They know this, but I'm just giving a fast overview. So reusability and extensibility. How we can reuse the code and how we can extend the code. So actually, code reusability and extensibility can be achieved in two ways. So code reusability and extensibility. Code reusability and extensibility is required to build application with backward compatibility, and multi-versioning environment. Multi-versioning environment. Actually, if anyone asks you like why we need to extend the code, why we have to extend the code, and why we have to reuse the code. Reuse the code is a concept which is very regularly practiced. Why you need this extensibility and reusability? So generally we do that to handle two basic things in application. One is to achieve backward compatibility and multi-versioning environment. For example, see, I will give another example for you here. Suppose I am writing here a script. So we are writing a class. In this class, so we are writing like just like option like we have HDFC Bank and version 1. That is a class we created. We are designing a class HDFC Bank version 1. Now, in this, we have some personal banking. Personal. This is actually personal banking services. Okay, this is just a sentence we stored in that. So in version 1, we have personal, that is a personal banking services, right? And NRI. So this is like NRI banking services. Banking services. We have two options here, and we have a print method. This print method is printing those two details. That means it is printing. So this dot personal, and in the next line, it is printing this dot NRI. It is printing both details. Okay. Now, after few days, we want to add one more feature to it. Means after few months or few days, we want to add one more feature to this app. Now, the question is, if they want to add one more feature, then they will build another version. In that version, they will add the new feature. Now, the doubt is, why can't they edit this version? So now the question asked is, why you are not modifying this version and adding a new feature into it? So why you are not modifying this version and adding new feature? Why you are planning for developing a new version? That is the major question. That means I hope you understood the point. So we are saying that why you are developing a new version to add a new feature? Why can't you modify this existing one? Why can't we modify this existing one? Then sometimes people may ask like, we can't modify because somebody may be using it. But we can ask them to stop using it because we want to add the new feature. We will say that please stop using this. We will add a new feature. But that is not the reason why we develop new version. And even if there is an existing version, why don't we modify that version? Because we want to achieve this concept of multi-versioning environment and backward compatibility. That means what is multi-versioning environment and what is backward compatibility? Multi-versioning environment means even a higher version is available, user is not interested in using it. He is satisfied with the work and actions performed by a previous version, so he will continue. That means, for example, you have Windows. Current Windows latest version is 11. In your PC, you may have Windows 10 or 8. If I ask you why you are not using Windows 11, because it is latest, then you can ask like, why should I use? Then they will say that we have some new features. Then you will say that I don't want them. I don't want those new features. Because to use those new features, I may need more memory. I may need more configuration, which I may not have in my PC. That is the reason, even if a higher version is available, still the lower versions are made available so that clients can use anything they want. This mechanism is called multi-version. Actually, earlier softwares cannot run multi versions. Means devices cannot run multi versions. From past few years, they were able to do because we changed the operating system libraries. Do you know? Few years back, suppose I am installing a software like uh, MS Office in my PC. MS Office, I am installing MS Office, I am installing some 2013. After that, I am installing MS Office 2015. Do you know, few years back, if I do like that, then it will overwrite 13 and install 15. Do you know now it will ask to keep both of them? That means it will ask, do you want to keep the existing version and install the new version? Do you know you can run same software, two versions on one PC? This is not possible earlier. That is not possible earlier. That is possible from recent days, means recent years. Earlier, it is not possible. When you install a software, it will overwrite. It will overwrite. But now it will keep the existing version and it will install the new. That is called multi-version. That means why you have to provide a older version if a new version is available, because everyone may not use the new version. Then we must able to provide the older version because several people devices don't support. That is the reason. On internet also it started like a revolution. Earlier on web applications we don't have. Recently web applications also have multi versions. Do you know web servers cannot run multi versions earlier? But now they changed the environment libraries in such a way that they can run multi versions. Why multi versions? Because, for example, you are uploading a file. You are uploading a file. When you are uploading a file, how to upload a file? There are two ways. One, drag drop, file will upload. Another method, click browse button, select the file, upload. Which one is better? Which one is better, drag drop or select the file, upload the file? Remember, drag drop will not work if your connection speed is slow. Drag drop will work only if your connection speed is high, because drag drop is an additional feature which requires more speed. If with less internet speed connection, low internet speed connection, you cannot use drag drop. Then that means you are saying that people don't have high connection speed, they can't upload files. Huh? No. Then people who don't have high connection speed, how they can upload the files? We will provide a lower version for them. Lower version is a lengthy process, but it will work. Higher version is a shorter process, but it requires more speed. So that means two versions of same app are working on a device. This mechanism is called as what? Multi-version. So without disturbing this, we have to build one more version. So class HDFC version 2. In this, we will put some loans, and we will put here some option like some personal and home loans. Something like this I am giving. Personal and home loans like that we are giving. Now in the new version, you developed a new feature and print that feature. Print the feature document dot write. So we are printing the feature this dot what loans. Okay, now in this second version, we added a new feature. But remember, this new feature should be in addition to the existing features. That means this new feature should work in addition to the two features. That means already version 1 is having some features. Those features, along with those features, this also should work. Now in version 2, how we will use those existing features? So code reusability and extensibility can be handled by using two techniques. We have two techniques. One is aggregation, another one is inheritance. Code reusability and extensibility can be handled using two techniques. One is aggregation, another one inheritance. We can achieve by using these two techniques, aggregation and inheritance. What is aggregation? Aggregation is nothing but it is the process of accessing members of one class in another class without configuring any relation between classes. It is the process of accessing members of one class in another class without configuring any relation between classes. That means without maintaining any relationship between classes, we can access the members of one class in another. So it is referred. What is referred? Yeah. So it is referred as object to object communication. It is referred as object to object communication. Technically, it is known as has a relation. In software programming, we call this as has a relation. So that means how you can access the members of one class in another class by using a technique called aggregation. By using aggregation technique, you can do that. Aggregation means without maintaining any relation between classes, we can access the members of one class in another. That is aggregation concept. For example, see now here, we are having version 2, version 1 and HDFC version 3. In the third version, we are having some credit card. So here we say, so credit cards. So this is a new module is present here, and print is a method which will print that document dot write this dot credit card. Okay. Now the version 2 must able to access version 1 related members. And I don't want any relation between these two classes. We don't want to connect them. Without connecting, we must able to access them. Then it is called aggregation. So in print method, we will create an object for the HDFC version 1, and through that object we will access the print method of first version, which will print the first version details. And in the third version, we will create an object for second version. Second version. And through that object, we can access the print method, which will access the second one. Second one will access the first one. This is aggregation. Remember, all three versions are disconnected. All three versions are disconnected, but all three versions able to access the previous version data. This mechanism of maintaining reusability of code, extending the code without having any relation between classes is called as what? Aggregate. Now the question is why you are doing like that? Why you are not interested in maintaining relation between classes? Because if we maintain relation between classes, then we have a problem of overriding members. That means if same name members are present, they may override. They should not override, just we have to reuse. The overriding of issues will come when we are trying to maintain relation between class. That is the reason without maintaining relation, we need to access. Now see what I am doing here. We will create a simple data list, data term. We will say select version. So we put a data definition. Here we will put a simple drop down and with an option select version. So here I will give install HDFC bank app. Okay. In that select version, this select version will have value as -1 because it is not a version. Then option I will give value as VR1. This is HDFC version 1, 20, some say 2022 like this. And we have value as version 2. So HDFC some version 2. And this is like 2023 like this. And we have another option. The value is VR3 and HDFC. This is so version 3 and 2024. Now we will put a button here as install. That means on click, install click is the function. So we will write here a function install click. Into that, so we will access the version number, document dot query selector, which one? Select dot value. And we will put a switch. Into that we will pass the version. If the case is VR1, then what should happen? It should create an object for HDFC version 1 and it should access the print method of that. obj1.print. It should print only the first version. And if it is version 2, then it should get obj2 HDFC version 2 and print that. And if it is version 3, then obj3 dot version 3 and it should print that version details. If it is default, then put a message document dot write, please select a version. That is the message we are giving break. Now what happens here is when you run this, you can see it is having a select a version and install. I will keep this button beside. Okay, now you have this. And you see here, you can add more option like, yeah, before printing this document dot write. So version 1 install, something like this. And I just given a heading style. Heading 2 style I'm adding. Okay, the same thing I will add for version 2 installed. and version 3 installed. Okay. That means now you can see I am selecting here the first version and it will get only the first version features. And I am selecting the second version, it will get both version 1 and version 2 features. I am selecting the third version, then it will get all the 4 features. That means even you have a higher version, you are still making the older version available. This is called multi-version. Backward compatibility is nothing but even you have a higher version, in that higher version, old features will still work. That is called backward compatibility. That means remember, sometimes when a new version is released, old options are no longer available. But if a software is releasing their new version in such a way that old features will still continue in it, then it is called backward compatible. If anyone asks what is backward compatibility, backward compatibility is the ability of having the features of old still working in new. Have you seen when we learned React in the beginning, first example of React, we linked React 18 library, but we are using React 17 syntax. It was still working, but it shows the warning to us saying that from 18 onwards, don't use this. But it was working. Is it stopped? You saw now? When we used React 18 in an app library, we used React 17 syntax. I told you that create root is from React 18. Dom.render, it is in React 17. We installed 18 library and we are using a 17 version syntax. It is working. That is the reason React, not only React, all latest technologies, they claim that they are backward compatible. That means they say that you install a new version, but still you can use the old version related features in it. If you are not providing that facility, that means it is not backward compatible. Backward compatible means what? Making available of old features in new. New. That means even they are not using new features, old features will be still running. That is the concept of backward. This is multi-versioning. Even a higher version is available, you can choose an older version to set up. And here, how you achieved reusability? By using a concept called aggregation. We are not maintaining any relation between classes, but we are able to access the members of one class in another. This is the example for aggregation. That is example for aggregation. There is another technique of reusability. Instead of aggregation, we can use inheritance. Inheritance. So it is the process of configuring relationship between classes in order to access the members of one class in another. JavaScript inherits by using extends keyword. JavaScript inherits by using extends keyword. And it is often referred as is a relation. We have has a relation and is a relation. Is a relation. And existing class is known as superclass. Newly created class that extends superclass is known as derived class, the superclass and the derived class. We have class super and we have class derived extends super. We have to use the keyword extends. Now you can access superclass members in derived class by using super keyword. You don't need an instance of class. By using super keyword, you can access the members of superclass in derived class. This is another concept of reusability and extensibility. And here, this is inheritance. And here, you know one basic rule of inheritance. So what is the basic inheritance rule? Let's see the basic inheritance rule here. That means now how we implement the same. Let's see the same example here. So we are using the same example. So let's say here, I will delete the object. Version 2 deletes version 1 objects. Version 3 deletes these objects. Objects are removed. And when objects are removed and you select version 2, only version 2 features will come. And you select version 3, only version 3 will come. So, but we want the versions to access the existing features. That means now what we can do is version 2 able to access version 1 also. Then how we can do that? Here, this time, now HDFC version 2 extends HDFC version 1. That means now version 1 is a super class and version 2 is a derived class. Now in the derived class print method, you can access super.print method, which is the superclass print method. And that superclass print method is going to print the details. That is basically the superclass print method working here. Now the same here in the version 3, this extends which version? HDFC version 2. Now this print method can access what? Super.print, which will be the second version print method, which is accessing already the first version method. That means now it is done. This time we are not creating an object. We are configuring relation between the classes here. Now you can see that I selected second version, it will get all the first and second. I selected the third version, I will get all the 1, 2, 3, 4. I get the first one, only the first one. I don't select anything and click install, say please select a version. We have default also written there for that. This is how we can reuse and we can extend. Now, what is inheritance rule? This example I will copy here. This is an example. Now, what is the inheritance rule? So here the question is, what is inheritance rule? Inheritance rule is nothing but a derived class constructor must call superclass constructor. That is the basic rule of inheritance. If you forget this rule, inheritance will fail. A derived class constructor must call superclass constructor. That is the basic inheritance rule. Generally, in other OOP languages like C++, Java, C Sharp, and all these languages, this rule is internally implemented. This rule is internally implemented. That means in Java or .NET or C++, when you create an object for a derived class, it will first call the superclass constructor, then followed by derived. That means if you are using inheritance, the basic inheritance rule is when you create an object for derived class, first the base class constructor should execute, then derived class. The inheritance rule is first to execute super constructor, then followed by derived. If by any means super constructor is restricted, then inheritance will fail. Inheritance will fail. Generally, it is not a question for JavaScript people, but for .NET and Java, C++ people, they ask a question, how to prevent inheritance? That means how to design a class so that it cannot be inherited. That is a very popular question. There are so many answers for that. One answer is if you can restrict the constructor of superclass, you cannot extend it. Generally, Java, .NET, all these people will give an answer like you can do that by using a private constructor. A private constructor is created in a superclass so that the constructor is not accessible to derived. If a constructor is not accessible to derived, then inheritance will stop. Inheritance will work only when super constructor is called in derived. So first, which constructor should execute? Super, then followed by derived. And if you don't follow this rule, inheritance will fail. For example, let's see that here. We are having a script, we have a class super. In this super, we have a constructor. This is document.write, and we have a super class constructor and break. Okay. And we are having class derived and constructor. This is actually document.write derived class constructor. This is what we are defining. Superclass constructor, derived class constructor. Okay. We will create an object for derived class. What is the rule of inheritance? The derived class can, this derived is extending what? Super. That means as per inheritance rule, first super constructor should execute, then followed by derived. If the super constructor is restricted, then inheritance will fail. Inheritance will not work. So here you see now, I will run this and we are creating this and you can see inspect in the console. Let's refresh this. Then you will see there is an error. And the error is must call super constructor in derived. That's a basic inheritance rule. If you don't follow this rule, inheritance will fail. These rules are very important because in React, when you create classes, every class is a derived class. In React, every component class is a derived class. And from where it is derived, I will show you. That means you have to be perfect in understanding these rules. So now, what is the solution? How do you call the super constructor in derived? By using super keyword. By using super keyword, we can call the super constructor in derived. Now the inheritance will successfully work. the super constructor and the derived constructor. Otherwise, inheritance fails, right? That is the basic rule of inheritance. So that means, so what is this basic inheritance rule? So a derived class, a derived class object, a derived class object must call superclass constructor before the derived constructor. A derived class object must call superclass constructor before derived constructor. That is the order actually. So here example is this, and here you can call JavaScript can call super constructor using super keyword. You can do that by using the super keyword. So that is inheritance. So this is one example for that. I will copy that example here. And that is the example. That's the example for using inheritance. So reusability and extensibility we can achieve in two ways. One is by using aggregation, another one by using inheritance. And inheritance is this one, right? And usually inheritance we have single and we have multi-level. Here we don't talk about multiple and all because we don't have interfaces and all here because this is not a OOP language. So that's the reason single inheritance, one superclass and one derived. Multi-level inheritance, a derived class is again extended by another derived class. Current our example is multi-level only. We have version 1 inherited by version 2, version 2 inherited by version 3. That this is the basic inheritance and inheritance rules, right? This is enough for people who are learning JavaScript because in JavaScript class related you will learn more points like polymorphism and all. For React we don't need that, but generally you will have a concept of polymorphism and all in classes. So I explained, I haven't explained, I just given a simple revision of class concepts that you learned already in JavaScript so that you have to now use this in React. So now what we will do, we will use this knowledge and we will build the components in React by using class. That we'll see tomorrow, right? In tomorrow's session, now we will switch to React, and now in React, we will use these classes. How to use class components, what is different? It will be little complete different because your hooks will not be there, use state, use effects will not be there. Then how you manage communication with the data and all, functions will not be there, variables we don't use directly. Then how to declare the data, use the data, it is little complete different approach that we will see in tomorrow's session. Okay, right.